Hi, now we're going to talk about the Federal Reserve's equity transfer program, the deflationary equity transfer program. Many people don't seem to understand the Federal Reserve's equity transfer program of deflation, so we're going to explain it now. All right, so right here, that's a house. That's right, that is a house, just a regular house. Over the course of the time we're going to talk about, it's the same house in the same condition, more or less. Alright, nothing changes about the house. We're just going to transfer the equity. That means the ownership. Alright, here we go. Right here, it's like beginning of 2000. Somebody buys a house for 1% down. I don't know, whatever. Let's say $1,000 down. 99% is in the red. 99% is owned by the lender. Alright, by the creditor, by the financing institution. Alright, now moving right along, we got 2001 next year, right? So they've been paying off the house. The debtors have been paying those mortgage payments. The price of rose of the house, right? The real estate prices rose. So 90% is in the red. It's owned by the lender. And now 10%, a little bit ways down the roof, getting close to where that window is, 10% equity for the debtor. Not great. Alright, that's like $10,000 or something. They put down 1,000, now they got something like 10,000. Okay. Now, a couple years, no, another year later, 1/1/2002, right? They're still paying off the house, right? Plus the price is still rising. This is great. 80% is in the red, owned by the lender, the creditor, the financing institution. And then 20% equity owned by the debtor. Oh my, they're really happy. They're really happy. They're thinking about doing a HELOC loan right about now, but they don't do that now. All right, I'll skip a couple years to 2005. Debtor now owns 50% equity of the house in the black. Okay, it's a $180,000 home now. Okay, it was a $100,000 home just 5 years ago when they bought it. Now it's a $180,000 home. They got $90,000 of equity, and about $90,000 debt. Whatever. You can. I'm just kind of estimating with the numbers here. Maybe they paid 120 for it. Whatever. Okay, now it's $180,000 home. They own $90,000 of equity. They only put $1,000 or whatever down. Now $90,000 equity. Think about that. That's amazing. Obviously, they've been paying their house payment, right? But still, come on, that's a lot of. Oh my gosh, this is just great. This is the best thing ever. Everybody else should be doing this. I can't understand why everybody wouldn't do this, right? All right, so 90%. Sorry, $90,000 of debt, 50% of the value of the home owned by the creditor, 50% of the value of the home, 50% of the equity owned by the debtor, the borrower, the person, people who live in that home, right? Okay, that's 2005. Now, something strange happens though. 2007 prices drop, so the creditor owns 80% again. The debtor only has 20% equity, and that's $20,000, right? They just had $90,000 of equity in 2005. 2 years later, they lost $70,000 equity. Isn't that weird? So now this is the same home, right? The $180,000 home in 2005. Now it's a $100,000 home in 2007. At $90,000 of debt, 2005. Well, now it's down to $80,000 of debt, but that's 80% of the value of the home. So there's this big equity transfer, right? 30% of the equity in those 2 years just went from the debtor to the creditor. And the debtor's been paying their mortgage all along here, right? But they just lost $70,000 of equity. But what they really lost was 30% of the equity. It was just a transfer of equity in the dollar amount. Not that big a deal because they didn't sell. If they had sold, then that's one thing. But they didn't. It's 2007. They still own it. 7 years now they've owned it. Now they put down $1,000, right? And 2000, now they got $20,000 of equity. They put in a lot of money paying mortgages over the years. They got 20% of the equity of the home. It's the same home. Started out 99% owned by the creditor, then went to 90% owned by the creditor, then 80% owned by the creditor, then 50% owned by the creditor. But then equity started to transfer back as the Federal Reserve deflationary equity transfer program, right? 30% of the equity is shifted back over to the creditor. Now it's 80%. It's 2007. All right. Now on is 2009. The real estate prices dropped more than they even had done by 2007. Now, oops, I'm looking at the wrong thing. Oops. Okay, basically what happens point is the house in 2009 is totally owned by the creditor. Nothing's left. It's a $90,000 or 80, what was it? A $75,000 home now. All right, it's a $75,000 home. $75,000 left on the mortgage. That means the creditor owns it all. They got 100% equity. In 4 years, they went from having 50% equity. Now they got 100% equity. That's all that's happened. Transfer of equity. All right. That's what happened with the home. Now people understand this. It's the same home all along, just who owns how much of it, right? The dollar amount isn't that big a deal. It's who owns what percentage of that actual home, right? Now I want to talk about a few stocks, a few companies, a few of these financial institutions. Fannie Mae, Washington Mutual Bank, AIG, a big insurance company. We're going to look at what happened, and they had a similar transfer of equity. I'm going to demonstrate that in just a minute. I'm going to pause here for a second. Okay, so now the creditor owns 100% of the equity or purchasing power for the home, right? That's what happened by 2009. Now let's look at a couple of quick charts here for AIG. We'll start with the first letter of the alphabet down there. 2002, it's up at 1400. Goes down, slides pretty hard there. 2008, yep, hasn't come up much since 2008, has it? All right. AIG is a big insurance company. They do things like insure mortgages. So when mortgages default, they have to pay the creditor when the debtor can't pay the mortgage, stuff like that. Pretty risky business, that whole insurance thing. Yep. All right. So now let's see what over here we got for Washington Mutual. All right, here 2007 is when they had a not so good year. Yeah. Washington Mutual not so good in 2007. Like I said, AIG, they insure mortgages. So once people couldn't pay, that's when AIG got hit. 2008, 2007. Washington Mutual, biggest bank in the history of the United States to go bankrupt. Yep. 2007 was a tough year for them. There was a big shift in the equity, the share. How do we put this? The value of the equity of the shareholders. It went from about $45 up there down to, well, a few cents in 2008. The amount of equity per share from $45 down to nothing, almost nothing, a few cents. All right, now let's look at Fannie Mae. Fannie Mae. Well, they had a tough year there in 2007 too. A couple tough years really, but that's Fannie Mae. Privately traded, privately owned, regular stock. Equity shares went from 80 to 70 cents. $80 to $70, $60, 50, 40, 30, 20. Oops, down to about nothing there in 2008. That's the value per share of owning the equity or shareholder equity. I noticed I used some similar words here. So let's imagine right now, instead of a home, that's Fannie Mae. That's everything Fannie Mae owns right there. 100% of all the stuff they own. That's it. It's Fannie Mae. Okay. Now in 2005, Fannie Mae's price was $70 per share, right? So 2005, 50% of the equity of Fannie Mae is owned by stock shareholders and the rest by the creditor. Where did I get 50%? Well, I just kind of borrowed it off of that other picture from the housing market. But the reason I did that, because Fannie Mae had creditors, right? They had borrowed money from other borrowers, right? They lent out money that they had borrowed in many cases. So they owed a lot of money, and they had a lot of they had all these mortgages. People were paying them mortgages and stuff, and every month they got a lot of money coming in. Kind of reminds me of insurance companies, but that's a different issue right there. So they owe a lot of money out, right? And they got some money coming in. So $70 per share, that's what it's worth to own a stock share of Fannie Mae in 2005. And let's say 50% of the value of Fannie Mae is owned by those stock shareholders. That's $70, and the rest is owned by the creditor. Let's say that's just how it works out. And we jump ahead to 2007. Fannie Mae's having some debt problems now themselves, right? People aren't. Well, one thing is all that collateral, all that real estate they own so much of, because that's pretty much what Fannie Mae does, is own real estate. Well, it's not worth as much as it used to be. Some concern comes up. Their shares are worth $60 a share now. Maybe the creditors own more than half of the equity of Fannie Mae now, with only $60 a share to each shareholder. Maybe that's kind of a little bit similar to what went on there. Creditors got more power there over Fannie Mae. Shareholders got a little bit less of what's left over. All right, something like that. I'll go over to 2009. This isn't really true, but it's a good analogy. So 2009, real estate prices dropped more. Yep. Yep. So Washington Mutual stock shares, they go to nothing almost. AIG stock shares, they were insuring all those mortgage insurance policies and all. They went to nothing. Fannie Mae went to nothing. 90 cents per share. Well, not nothing. 90 cents per share, something like that, left to the shareholders. What happened when they go bankrupt? When a company goes bankrupt like that, that means their creditor gets to own the company outright, pretty much, and the shareholders, they get what's left, if anything. So real estate prices had dropped a lot by 2009. Now all of Fannie Mae is owned by the creditor. Pretty much all of it's owned by the creditor. Look at that. And only maybe 90 cents per share of equity to the shareholders. That's a little tiny black dot up at the top. I don't know if you can see that. So the creditor owns Fannie Mae. Now who's the creditor? The creditor is Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is another private company. So now Fannie Mae has outright equity ownership of all those homes. Remember that other things? 100% of the homes, still same home. All that equity shifted over to Fannie Mae. They were the creditor for those homes, right? All that equity shifts over to them. They have 100% ownership of the homes. But at the same time as that happened, now the Fed has outright ownership of Fannie Mae. Look at that. And that's what we call the Federal Reserve's deflationary equity transfer program. They get to own all that equity of all those companies, all those financial institutions, Fannie Mae, AIG, what's the other one? Washington Mutual, that's the other one I mentioned. A lot of others too, but we'll just pick those three for now. They get to own all that equity of all those companies, all those financial institutions. And those financial institutions, they get to own all that additional equity and all that real estate. It's a big equity transfer program. It's going pretty good. I must say. If the Federal Reserve is trying to tell people they're fighting inflation at the same time as they're deflating credit markets, it's going pretty good. People believe in it. This is horrible. Federal Reserve is just trying desperately to prevent themselves from coming into total ownership of the real estate in the United States. They're really fighting against that. They're going to protect us from themselves owning all that real estate, because that would be like, wait a minute. Well, that would be pretty much the Federal Reserve's deflationary equity transfer program right there. Creditor, that's the Federal Reserve, owns Fannie Mae, they own AIG, all that bankruptcy situation there. That's because those companies owed out a lot of money. Those financial institutions owed out a lot of money. Who they owe it to? Mostly the Federal Reserve. Isn't that weird? Wouldn't that be weird? I'm not saying this is true. It's just a good analogy, right? It's just a good analogy. It if the Federal Reserve did have this situation, this would have been a good few years for them, wouldn't it? Good few years, and it might be just the beginning because there's a lot of financial institutions left. There's a lot of real estate still owned by the public in the United States, right? But they had a lot of debt. I sure hope, if I was the Federal Reserve, I sure hope those people don't sell. I sure hope they just sit there in all their homes and just wait for the banks and institutions to own them all outright, own all the equity in the homes, and the Federal Reserve can own all the equity in the companies. See, they'll own it all. That'd be swell. I hope people don't wake up to this and start selling their stocks of other stuff too, selling their shares of other stuff. All those companies like Microsoft, and I shouldn't name them, should I? I shouldn't name them. Not just financial institutions, all those other companies, they owe a lot of money. They borrow a lot of money, so they owe a lot of money. They got all these creditors. What if they have a little trouble paying their debt? Well, oops, Federal Reserve owns them too. That'd be the Federal Reserve Deflationary Equity Transfer Program. Some people call it communism, but I think that's kind of a weird way to put it. When nobody owns anything except the Federal Reserve, why do they call it communism? I don't know. Anyway, if you guys want to know how to do good stuff and protect yourself and maybe benefit from some of this big equity transfer, I know that seems like a weird thing to do. Benefit from this big transfer of equity? You wouldn't want to do that. No, you just should stay how you are already, because that way, the Federal Reserve will thank you for it later. But if you were interested in protecting yourself or benefiting a little bit, yeah, you might want to contact somebody who understands this kind of stuff, who knows what kinds of things would be beneficial in a situation like this, knows what kind of investments would be safe, be lucrative. You might want to do that. All right. Well, thank you so much, all of you folks who are faithfully participating in the Federal Reserve's equity transfer program of deflation. It is so good doing business with you.